Hello, my name is Julie, and it's time to talk about all the books that I read in February. The sun is low-key going down, and it is so beautiful outside. It's in like the low 70s. We haven't had this nice of weather since probably like early November, and I'm like, all I want to do is be outside right now, but I have to film this because I'm going to be so busy. Let's just start out with all my stats. So I read 11 books in February. I was very proud of that because I didn't think I was going to get there, for a total of 4,271 pages. Right now, I'm looking at an average of a 3.6. I think that's kind of subject to change. A lot of the times you'll hear me say a number and then the number will be changed on the screen. That's like if it's changed in the week or so since I filmed this. I have 0 books that I'm giving a full 5, but there are still several that I would really recommend this month. Had an average page count of 388 pages per book and 152 pages per day. I read 4 books from my owned collection. I only added 1 to my TBR and unhauled none, for an annual net TBR of already -7. Not too bad. As for star ratings, we had a dominant amount of 4s, almost as many 3s, and then 1 book that right now, I think I'm giving a 1 star. I'm so sorry. I tried to give it a 2. I think I put 2 on my Instagram. I can't do it. I don't think I can lie. As for genres, very well split this month. Fantasy was our #1 category, followed by mystery, thriller, horror, and shockingly, historical fiction. As for series standing, we had a lot of standalones. I had 1 first book in series that is not a reread. We had a reread this month, and 2 sequels. I had 5 physical books I read this month, a record-breaking 2 ebooks I read this month. Guys, what is happening? And 4 audiobooks that I listened to, which is normal. As for author familiarity, I had 6 authors that were new to me that I read, 5 new to me books from authors I read before, and 1 reread as I previously mentioned. So let's get started with the books. The first 3 books that I read this month were all for my February reading vlog that I posted most recently. That was for me reading the BookTubers Best Books of 2025. I watched over 200 BookTubers Best Books of the Year video, found the people with the most in common with me, and I read 1 book off of each of their lists that I had not read from before and wasn't in a series I had already read. So if you want to catch that, you can watch that and come back here. First up, we had Flashlight by Susan Choi. This is a historical fiction that was shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. This takes place over decades, but the inciting incident of this is that in the 60s, Louisa is American, she's half white, she's half Korean. Her father was born in and grew up in Japan. And when she is in 4th grade, her father gets a job teaching in Japan for a year, and one day they're on the beach at dusk together, and suddenly she wakes up completely drenched on the beach by herself, and her father is nowhere to be found. And so we take place over decades before and after this incident, kind of seeing the ramifications of what happened because of this. And it's mostly a slow building character study of these 3 characters that are linked together by family, but not necessarily love. This book is not for people who hate slow books. It's not for you. It's not like one that I think you could get over either. I think this book takes a long time to get to the point of why this book was written. While I was invested the whole time, I definitely was like, at the 50% mark, I'm like, what the hell is the last half of this book gonna be? Like, what could possibly be the plot? It did make itself apparent, and I do think that this book introduced me to a historical event that I did not know happened. And I think that is something that people my age definitely don't know about. And that was really important for me to read. Like, I immediately was like reading articles about the real life events that this was inspired by. And I think that this did a very good job building out these really fleshed out characters. But when you see them from the perspectives of the other people, they feel very different, or they seem very unreasonable, and how these characters like just don't fundamentally understand each other. I think this book is very low plot. So much of what is done is in the surface of character, and every single moment that we are in the book is given several sentences. Like, every single scene is sat in for a very long time, even if maybe not that much is going on, and it feels very insular. There are times that you're going to forget that this is even a historical fiction because the time period isn't always super relevant to whatever the scene is, compared to another historical fiction that I read this month that is very like, hey, this is the events that were happening at the time. I did enjoy this book. I do think that reading this on ebook could have hurt me. I tend to not like ebooks, and I kind of only read ebooks when I have to, like for this video or from NetGalley or something like that. That made this experience more painful, but honestly, the further I went on, the more sucked in I was and the more I wanted to keep reading. I did enjoy this one. If you are someone who is into literary fiction, you're someone who is not very well versed in the after effects of World War II on East Asia, I think that this could be an interesting book to read. This one I have been like wavering in between a 3.75 and a 4, because I think quality-wise this is very good, but enjoyment-wise I think it was a little bit less than I perfectly would have wanted. Next up, the only book that I owned for that video was The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino. This is the first in a new epic fantasy romance companion series called The Hand in the Heart, and in this book in particular we have our main character who is Gray. She is a lady knight, and she also happens to be a well. And a well in this part of the world is someone who pairs up with a mage, and they are the supply for the mage's power. And the mage cannot get magic on their own. They have to have wells. And our main character's mage is Kier, who, as a Severance fan, scary. Kier is her childhood best friend who she has been in love with forever, and she just doesn't think he's interested in her, and that is very apparently not true from the very beginning. And the two of them are sent on a quest that could be good for them in the long run, but it threatens to reveal the secret they have together and the secret that she is keeping from him. I thought that this book very easily could be broken down into its 3 acts, and my critiques of it kind of fall into that 3-act structure. The first act, no notes. I really enjoyed how long it sat in the pre-inciting incident time. I liked how much we saw of their lives right now before they go on a journey, because I think it really grounded what their relationship is like. Even though this is a pre-established relationship, we see the right amount, in my opinion, of their backstory. But I think she sold the chemistry of the characters right off the bat. So, in my opinion, if it doesn't sell you right off the bat, this might not be for you. If you're someone who DNFs books, which I'm not. I haven't learned my lesson. Second act, I thought was kind of meh. The third act was more interesting than Act 2, but I think it introduced some new fantasy subject that we probably should have sown seeds for earlier in the book. You could argue that it's Deus Ex Machina, but in my eyes, problem and solution are both inserted in one place. And it's like we didn't have any context that this problem or solution could happen. I actually would have really loved an entire trilogy following these two characters, and I think that we could have spent more time building out like the politics of this world, the complications in the magic, and the dynamic between the two of them. I am hovering between 4.0 and a 4.25. The beginning of this book had a pretty good chance of being a 5-star, and the further it went on, the less I was in love with it. But I still enjoyed it, and I am planning on continuing on in the series if I hear good things about the next ones. And the last book I read in that video was Homeseeking by Carissa Chen. This is another historical fiction. This is about our main characters Haiwen, or Howard, and Suchi. And the two of them grew up in the 1940s in Shanghai together. They were in love with each other from a very young age. They wanted to get married and everything, but Haiwen ended up being sent off to war, and that tore them apart. And at the beginning of the book, they reunite in Los Angeles in 2008. Now grandparents with full lives behind them, and they've never stopped thinking about each other. We follow Suchi's point of view, starting with the day they met through to her current life, and with Haiwen/Howard, now in the United States, we see them as grandparents a little bit before we start going backwards in time to the day that he left. This is such a book clubbable book. If this isn't a Reese's book club pick or something like that, I'd be really shocked. I think this book is very emotional. I love a book that takes place over decades, if you can't tell, and this really does that well. I think that this book did a very good job portraying the changes that these characters have had over time, and we really get to see how their lives have affected them so much. Their perceptions have held up, but the person that's in front of them is so different now. Suchi's perspective in particular was gutting, so heart-wrenching, seeing all the things that happened to her and how her life just does not turn out the way that she wanted wanted it to, and how she has sort of scraped together the life that she could get. And you just want happy things to happen to her. I wanted to know what happened in Highwind's life, but overall, I was more invested in the two of them being together than his particular perspective, if that makes sense. But I do think there was a lot of interesting commentary, particularly what happened to him during wartime. The war that this is mostly following is the Chinese Civil War, and how that kind of played into the characters and everything. When we get to Highwind's wartime, I think that was the most interested I was in him, because it was really interesting to see when he enlists how he feels about the cause versus how he does at the end of his service. I think these characters will resonate with a lot of people. I think this just was edited very well, that we have like a good placement of when the moments happen, and just bouncing between these perspectives, they were balanced really well. I do recommend the audiobook as I listened to that, and the narrators were great. I really, really love this book, and right after it, I was like, oh, this is a 4.5. This, maybe if it stays in my head, it'll be a 5, and it'll be one of my favorites of the year. But I will say, I do think this book has kind of waned from my mind a little bit. I haven't found myself sitting and thinking about it as much as I thought I would. So right now, we're in the 4.25, 4.5 category. So these 3 books I've been wishy-washy on. Oops. Next up, we have Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. I got this from Book of the Month when it came out this time last year. This one's also partially historical fiction, but it is more general fiction. There's some historical inserts. Our main character is Ebby, short for Ebony. She and her brother grew up as the only Black kids in their rich neighborhood. Her wider family criticized her parents for putting them into a gated community and everything. They had a jar that was very special to them, that was handed down from an enslaved relative all the way down to modern day, early 2000s. When Ebby was around 10, somebody broke into their house, shot her older brother, killing him, and broke the jar. And now she is an adult. At the very beginning of the book, she has been stood up at her wedding to a white man, and she freaks out and decides to go to the French countryside to lick her wounds. So we are following mostly Ebby, but we do see perspectives of the other people around her, including her ex-fiance, his current girlfriend, her mom and her dad. But we also get historical inserts of the life of the jar. And I do think that we establish that those are the stories that have been passed down through the generations about the jar, about the different people who have had it. This book isn't very long, but I kind of felt like it had a lot of fat on it. The ending of this book, when our family is finally like coming together and everything at the end of this book, and the stuff that happens at the end, I really felt for that. But like the part where Ebby is in the French countryside, I didn't feel like it had a lot to do with the rest of the book. I didn't really understand why we were spending so long dealing with this ex-fiance. It just felt like an entirely different book, and one that I wasn't really interested in reading. And I just don't really understand what that was supposed to do. And there was a little bit of a plot line going on there that I won't spoil what happens in it, that it just felt like it led nowhere. Like, it's like, oh, you think this big dramatic thing is gonna happen, and then it's like, no. I do think that having this be when Ebby is an adult was a good idea. I just wish that we had her be around the people who were involved in all of the things going on, staying at home this whole time and talking to her parents and having them interact and everything. I don't know. And you read like the end of the book, and the end of the book really felt like Charmaine Wilkerson, but the whole French countryside thing, I'm like, what's going on? I don't know. I have like nothing to say other than that. So I'm thinking of giving this book like a 3.5 star. Probably right now. Then I borrowed my friend's audiobook of the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook by Matt Dinneman. This is the 3rd book in Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is a fantasy sci-fi-ish series in which our main character is Carl, and he and his ex-girlfriend's cat are some of the few survivors of an alien takeover of Earth, and they have set up this game that is going to be televised to the entire universe, in which they have to go through dungeon levels underneath the Earth with all of these Dungeons and Dragons-ish, goofy-type characters that they have to beat. This is a lit RPG, so it is set up like a video game. There's a lot of explaining of rules. Characters have an inventory. They can see their own health. They can see their stats, that sort of thing. This is the only a lit RPG I've ever read. The first book I think was a 4.75 and it ended up making into my best books of the year last year. The second book I enjoyed less than book 1, but it was mostly because I think it was much shorter. Book 3, longer than book 2 because it's a more difficult level. This one had to do with trains. It was like a really interesting idea of the Iron Tangle, this train system that they have set up where all of these monsters come on these trains and you have to try to figure out like how to survive, how to level up the best way and everything. And I think that was such a good idea that had me engaged at the beginning. But like the more this book went on, the more it was just info dump over and over again. And I'm like, particularly in book 2, there were like storylines that the producers of the show are setting up. And in this one, the storylines were more having to do with the other players and everything. And those were interesting. I think the actual gameplay of it was just a little bit convoluted because he kept having to explain himself. And that does make me worried for how I'm going to like further books in the series if I thought this one was convoluted. Because it's only going to get more complicated as the levels go on, right? I really enjoy our characters. Love Carl, love Princess Donut, I love Katya, and I really think that it's been interesting seeing the different players popping in and out. One of the critiques of the series is how much like man writing Matt Dinniman has, like just, you know, writing about women in a particular way. And I think that this book, there are more female characters that are interacted with this book than in the previous books, like particularly like monsters. The way that they're talked about, it's very like man of humor, boy humor, just kind of crass. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it crosses over the line for me. And it's not enough for me to stop reading the series, but it's just something like, if that bothers you a lot, maybe this wouldn't be my first pick for you. And the sun is setting enough that like I know that there's light on my face and I'm so sorry. There's like nothing I can do about it. Enjoyed my time, but I would say that this is my least favorite of the 3 so far. So I think I'm settling on like a 4-star for this book right now. Next up, we have The Battle Drum by Sarah Ella Reefy. This is the second in the Ending Fire trilogy, which the first book in that was also one of my favorite books of 2025. I have only heard that the sequels are not as good as the original. I'm happy to say that while I do think this isn't quite as good as book 1, I think it's fairly on par for the most part. This is a series that is inspired by African and Arabian mythology. So the world of the series is that there is this island nation that is an empire that is populated by red-blooded people, blue-blooded people, and clear-blooded people. And the red-blooded people have magic and the others do not. There is a fire that was supposed to have killed off the rest of the world, and they're all of civilization left. The blue-blooded people are working class, and the clear-blooded people, after a rebellion, have been entirely enslaved. Their tongues are cut out and their hands are cut off when they are children. And in the first book, our main character Scylla was raised to be part of this rebellion, and terrible things happen to the people in the rebellion, so she has fallen into disarray and addiction, and she doesn't think that she's actually going to be poised to be in the competition for who is going to become some of the rulers of the empire like she was trained to do since she was little. This book, I can't really talk necessarily about the plot of this, but it is expanding our understanding of what happened in the past based on our plot twists in the book 1. And I think that this continued to build plot twists on the world in this book on top of that one. So I think in plot-wise, world-wise, learning about what's possible and everything, this is a worthy sequel to book 1. I think where this book lacked for me is in character, because in book 1, I was so obsessed with the character relationships, whether they're romantic or not, whether I want them to be together or not. It was just that like I wanted these characters to work together. They were really fun chess pieces on the board. And this book does have our characters sort of siloed into different plots going on, more than in the previous book. And this one also had our 2 most main characters from book 1, for different reasons, be more passive players in what is going on than in book 1. And I don't necessarily think that that served the plot. Things are happening to them rather than them doing things. It's usually other characters doing things, whether we're from those perspectives or not. And just, I was really looking for more, I don't know, badassery from the 2 of them, when instead we get to focus on other characters, or they are kind of left to wait for other things to happen to them. I did really enjoy this one. I got through it pretty easily, and I am excited to read book 3, even though I literally hate the paperback cover of book 3. It is so ugly, in my opinion, and I'm so sad. I really wish I would have gone out of my way to buy the hardcover editions of these books because I think the art on those is so pretty. I know people are usually like, I don't like characters in those books, but this feels like very stylized. The way that the faces look like a painting rather than just like a photograph or something. Like, I just think these look so nice. These two, the first 2 books look nice in this. They look kind of generic, honestly. But the book 3, oh, ugly. So I think I'm giving this book 4.25 or a 4.5. Less than book 1, but still very good. Then I listened to Mutual Aid by Dean Spade. This is a nonfiction little guide that was given to people who have a Libro FM subscription based on all of the atrocities that have been going on in the United States, specifically around the murders that happened in Minnesota. Libro allowed people to download this audiobook for free for like a week. This is a very short book. It was a 4-hour audiobook that's split into 2 parts. The first part is describing what the author believes mutual aid is, and the second part is sort of a guidebook to maintaining mutual aid if you are already in it. So, to describe mutual aid is a group of people coming together to solve problems in their community. And the idea is that they are not charities. They are not something that is focused on grants and getting donor support. It is a lot of the times, the people that are affected are coming together for the community, the people on the ground doing the work. And there was a better definition of the difference between mutual aid and charity in the book. I think that this book is useful in very specific situations. I don't think that this is like a guide for everyone. And I also don't think that this book is very good to listen to on audiobook, I'll be frank. So I think Libro FM was doing a very good gesture, and I think that this will be helpful, for example, for people in Minnesota who are already setting up mutual aid projects. But I think that this is not something for someone who is not involved in mutual aid. This is kind of like a book that someone in mutual aid would have like on their desk to reference whenever they're like feeling there's something going astray, or remind themselves what the tenets of mutual aid should be. The definition part was helpful to me as someone who is not currently involved in mutual aid, but it did encourage me to want to get involved. Then it skips into, okay, you already have an established mutual aid. How do you get things done when you do not have an established hierarchy of leadership? Because that's something else that mutual aid is not wanting to do. They're wanting to decentralize decisions as much as is productively possible. And a lot of the things that it was trying to work on, I don't think were super duper helpful. For example, there was a section that was, what's a domineering leader versus a collaborative leader? And it was literally just a table. There were a lot of tables in this book. And it lists domineering leader doesn't listen to people. Communicative leader listens to people. Domineering leader does XYZ. Communicative leader does ABC. And it's like, that's how that was read out in the audiobook. So like, not only do I think that table specifically that is calling out what not good leadership looks like would be helpful, because I don't think someone would be self-aware enough to realize, oh, I'm in column A. I'm in the bad column. But on top of that, listening to that on audiobook was painful. I would recommend, if you want to read this book, if this sounds like something that would be helpful for you, I think that this is something that you could use. I just absolutely would not recommend this on audiobook at all. This is something you would use for reference. This isn't necessarily something you'd read and like give back to the library or something like that. This is something you would keep around to reference for later, so having it on audiobook is also not helpful in that department. So I also wish that this book discussed way more about the history of mutual aid in order to give more context about what mutual aid can do. But if you're a person who likes reading like leadership-y type books, I think that this could be something that you could use. I'm not a person who would pick up that type of book. I am interested in reading other things about mutual aid, and this has definitely opened up my interest to the subject. I just don't think that this book is as helpful as I was thinking it was from the beginning. I don't know. The lighting's entirely different now because I opened up the blinds fully. Who cares? It's fine. So kicking myself. The next book that I read was The Subtle Art of Folding Space by John Chu. This is a debut novel from an author who has won different short story awards across different awards, like the Nebula and the Hugo. I was provided with this e-arc by NetGalley and the publisher, so thank you so much to them for providing one of my most anticipated books of the year. This is what the synopsis says the book is. Our main character, Ellie, her mother is in a coma, and she finds out that the skunk works, the thing that maintains the universe and its physics around them, has something that is breaking the universe that is keeping her mother alive. That's what the synopsis says. What the synopsis should say is that all of that happened in the past. Ellie's mother was in a coma, and there was something in the skunk works that was keeping her alive. But before the book even starts, Ellie has already removed that part of the skunk works, and her mother has died as a result. Literally, her funeral is like chapter 2. Her mother is already dead by the beginning of the book. Also, part of the synopsis is that her sister keeps trying to assassinate her. And I'll tell you, didn't understand that. I'm going to tell you right now, if I would have picked this book up from the library and read the first page, first chapter, I would not have taken this book home. If I had not gotten this for review, I don't think I would have finished it. And I think just the fact that I had it on ebook on my phone is the reason I did finish it, because like if I was like waiting in line, I could like read a little bit at a time. But if it was going to eat into my other reading time, I would not have finished this book at all. I think that this book was written in a very convoluted way. I literally did not understand what was going on. I saw someone make a comment about how this book is so physics-based and that made it confusing. Hi, I'm an engineer. And not only that, I took extra physics class in college for fun. The thing that is confusing about this book is not the physics. Yeah, it'll briefly mention quantum mechanics and quarks and stuff like that, but like in a sci-fi way that doesn't actually mean anything to the book. Like the things that's confusing is that the author does not establish world building for this book at all. People can just randomly do magical things for no reason, and there's no explanation for it. Our main character, Ellie, has nothing to do. Her cousin David, who's barely in the synopsis, is so much more characterized, has something going on. He's in like every scene of the book, and Ellie just is like an observer going on, and it's kind of like, why is Ellie our main character? I would say that there's only one scene that I liked in this book, and it's a confrontation that Ellie has with her sister about how the two of them think the other is a terrible person. I didn't understand anything about this book. I don't think it establishes really what the skunkworks are. It doesn't establish the random magical powers our characters seem to have. They just seem to be able to whip out of nowhere. There's scenes that feel very repetitive and seem to go nowhere, particularly around her sister trying to assassinate her. How she keeps somehow knowing where the main character is, knowing what car she's in, even if it's not hers, somehow placing a car bomb in the car, but it's not a real car bomb, but it's kind of a real car bomb. How they seem to be able to pull up like a 3D model of a car bomb that they can't even see in the air. No scientific principle, just like poof. This is what we think it's going to look like. How would you know? And how they dismantled all these car bombs like over and over again. What the fuck is going on? I read this book cover to cover. I did not skim. I did my best. I did my hardest. What is going on in this book? It has nothing to do with physics. It has nothing to do with science. I think that this author is a short story writer that has not had to establish logic before in a short story. There are other books that I've read, something like This Is How You Lose a Time War. You're supposed to like live in the confusion. I don't think that this was supposed to be confusing. Not only that, the interesting thing that could have happened in this book, her having to like give up her mom, already happened before the book started. So that's not interesting. I just didn't understand the writing style. There's supposed to be like a mystery of like who has done this thing. And it's like, there's no mystery because you don't even know what's going on. I'm so sorry that this was my experience with this book and I was an early reader. But this book has already got like a 3.51 and it will not come out for like 2 more months. I don't think I'm the only one who had these feelings, but like, I felt like I was losing my mind reading this book, and not in a good way. I think it would be really disingenuous for me to give this anything but a 1 star. And I'll tell you right now, I could probably go on for longer, but I'm not going to because I want to preserve my sanity and go outside. 3 more books to go. I have Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. This is a 2025 release that I got from Aardvark because, oh my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I love this. And I did reinstate my Aardvark subscription just to get this, and I've been happy with it because they've had a lot of good stuff lately. Especially if you are a horror or a fantasy reader, you should be subscribed. Our main character, Vera, is a statistics and probability professor who's about to publish this book on this casino that says it gives people better odds, but when you run the numbers, they don't actually pay out more money to people, but everything seems completely legal. So what's up? Something happens that absolutely destroys humanity's understanding of things with this low probability event where all of these absolutely ridiculous things happen. How does the book describe it? 8 million people were killed in a single day, all of them dying in improbable, bizarre ways. Strangled by balloon ropes, torn apart by exploding manhole covers, attacked by a chimpanzee wielding a typewriter. That sort of thing. It's very Final Destination, but like goofier. She is traumatized by this event, and years later, she is approached by somebody from the US government saying, hey, we're trying to study that casino that you had started doing research on. Can you come with us? We're going to try to stop low probability events. And she's like, there was only one. And they're like, there have been more. This is a fairly short horror. The text is pretty big and it's only like 230 pages. Our main character's journey is sort of getting over her nihilism, how she used to believe in probability and stuff. And when something absolutely unpredictable happened to her, she loses all faith in anything and thinks that nothing matters. But this is her learning that things matter again. And I think that theme right there, especially in the wake of all of the terrible things that have been happening in my country right now, I think that message is good. I think that the horror was creative in here and got like bloodier in a way that I was into, but like there's not a lot that happens in this book. I think that this would, because it's so short, be very easily adaptable, but I just felt like this book could have been shorter or longer. I feel like this medium point where like we could have built out more stuff, we could have had more things going on with Vera, or this could have been more of a novella, like knock this down to the under 200 page mark, cut some other stuff, and have this be a very solid novella. Fun, had a good message, but it wasn't as strong as I would have liked it to be. I think that there was something a little bit missing, and if it was going to just be what this is, I think it could have pared down the length a little bit. Then I listened to King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. I almost said Stephen Cosby. I don't even know what his first name is. S.A. Cosby. This is a brutal thriller. I have already read Razorblade Tears from this author, and that book was on the line almost too bloody for me, but this was like the only thriller that I saw a lot of people talking about in their favorite books of the year list, and I just happened to be able to get it from my library pretty quickly. So out of a couple other audiobooks that I sampled, this was by far the best narrated audiobook, so I just decided to go on this one on a whim, not actually knowing what this book was about, because I wasn't watching all those videos, I was skimming all of them because I watched 200 of them. This is about our main character, Roman, and him and his siblings grew up poor, and then their family finally scraped together enough money to build a crematorium, and that's how they made their wealth. A couple years after it opened, their mother went missing, and everyone in town believes that their father did it. Both of his siblings have stayed in town, but Roman is like a big shot financier in Atlanta. He gets a phone call that his father is in a coma after a car accident that doesn't seem like it was very much of an accident, and he is coming home only to find out that his brother Dante, who has been struggling with addiction after all the things that happened in their childhood, he actually got in with a gang, did not mean to, but ended up crossing them. That's what put their father in the hospital. So Roman, with all of his knowledge of money and now the power of the crematorium, is going to try to take down this gang. This book was a slow burn for me. Pun unintended, but that's really good. It was a slow burn for me in terms of being invested in it. Like, I think that the mystery and the setup of it all was good, but like the further the book went on, the more like high stakes and everything went. Like the very last chapters of this book were like the chess game that this book was, but the very brutal, bloody chess game. I think that this book, compared to Razorblade Tears, on the spectrum of themes to entertainment, Razorblade Tears is more in the themes department, and this is more in the entertainment department, but both of them have both. I would say that this book I enjoyed more. I don't know if it was listening to it on audiobook or the way that our main character changes, but mostly our perception of the main character changes over the course of the book is so fascinating. I thought that this did such a good job building stakes and tension. I don't know, I don't want to say anything that spoils this book. It's thriller, it's hard to talk about. I just thought this was really enjoyable. I would love to watch this be a movie. Please, somebody adapt this. I don't want to say anything else about this book for fear of spoiling it, but I think that this is something that, as long as you can stomach it, this book is really going to grab you, and I'm happy to finally have a thriller that I really enjoy because it's been so freaking long. I'm giving this a 4.5 at this moment. And the last book that I read in March was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This was my reread of the month, and one of my major goals this year is that I'm going to reread the entire Hunger Games trilogy, which I have not read since I was in 5th grade. Note, that means I was younger than Prim was when I read the entire series, and I am going to read both of the prequels for the first time in anticipation of the movie coming out in November. I loved this. First of all, I could not put this book down. I think it's partially helped by the Scholastic edition I own from a box set. The print is humongous. I mean, it's gigantic. The original book is like 375 pages and this one's 450, so it definitely made me feel like I was getting through it quickly, but I mean, I would sit down for an hour to read this and not pick up anything. I annotated this book a little bit, and I was just having so much of a good time seeing how well constructed this book is. Every little line is so important, and picking up on a lot of things that I could not pick up on because I was so young, and also with my knowledge of how the series develops as it continues, and seeing things how Suzanne Collins would say things in this first book and decide to use them later as things that are more significant and more emotionally resonant. I decided to vlog my experience of this, and that is coming down the pipes soon enough. So you will see my full thoughts on this, full spoilers and everything, me talking about little minutia that I did not remember and how this plays into things that happen later in the series. Really, really enjoyed this. And every time I was talking about it, all I could say was just, oh, this book's so good. Over and over and over again. I'm really curious to know what I would think of this book if I had never heard of The Hunger Games before and was reading it as a 24-year-old, but obviously we don't live in that world. But I just thought that this holds up beyond belief. It is entertaining as hell on top of being so deep. I love this book, and I cannot wait to be getting into the new content. So I'm also going to be watching the movie and talking about that in that video, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So that's all the books I read in February. Let me know what you read. Have you read any of these books? Is there anything you'd recommend me based on what I talked about in these books? I love to know. And if you don't have anything to say and you got to the end of the video, what if you left me a playing card emoji in honor of Lucky Day? Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere, or if you want to get your first book of the month, or Aardvark book, or Libro FM book, you can all find the links down in the description. It lets those companies that I do love supporting know that I brought you there. And if you'd like to keep watching my videos, you can hit subscribe and you'll find out when I make new ones. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.